Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum, and today we are taking a look at an interesting hybrid commercial rifle from the early 2000s. This is a Masterpiece Arms MPA-971. MPA, of course, is Masterpiece Arms, and 971 refers to the caliber of this guy, which is 9mm parabellum, and its intended magazine capacity, which is 71 rounds. These were designed very explicitly around existing surplus Suomi drum magazines, that 71 round capacity. So Masterpiece Arms is a company that was founded in 2000, and their main early product was a clone of the Ingram M11 pistol as a semi-auto. You know, these are well, they look like little machine pistols, semi-automatic only. They are frankly not comfortable to fire, not particularly accurate, not very practical. Like, they're actually frankly kind of awful. In fact, even the original Ingram examples made back in the 60s, when they were really trying to do them right and do them as machine pistols as well, even those are not what you would call masterpieces, and neither was the production by Masterpiece Arms. But they've always been popular. They have that look, and they're cool, and whatever, people buy them. At any rate, by 2003, Masterpiece Arms was looking to expand their production into something else as well. And they came up with this based on a bunch of elements that either were existing very cheaply or were something that Masterpiece Arms was already essentially tooled up to make. So basically what we have here is an AR handguard, a generic 9mm barrel, a completely unmodified FAL lower and buttstock and trigger assembly, an existing imported Suomi submachine gun magazine, and then a receiver housing made new by Masterpiece Arms to hold the whole thing together. Now, the core element of this was the magazine, because this was manufactured or introduced in 2003, which is during the assault weapons ban. And that was a law that was in place from 1994 until 2004, and among its other effects, it prohibited the manufacture or importation of magazines that held more than 10 rounds. But all existing magazines in the US were grandfathered. So those you could continue to have, you just couldn't make or buy new ones. Well, you couldn't make new ones, you could transfer existing magazines that were grandfathered. And this law ended in 2004, but no one actually expected that it would. The original 1994 bill included a sunset clause. That was a compromise that was made to get it passed that said that after 10 years it would expire and all of its provisions would cease to have effect. And having been there at the time, nobody really expected that that ban would be allowed to actually sunset in 2004. Everyone figured that Congress would pass a renewal or a replacement or something, and the magazine ban would continue after 2004. And so that's why you see a company like Masterpiece Arms building a gun to work around that law right before that law actually ceased to exist. Anyway, because old magazines were grandfathered, what Masterpiece Arms did is look for an example of a magazine that was in highly available, but not particularly in high demand. What are the good high-capacity magazines out there that we can use in an existing gun, or in a new gun? We have to be able to buy a whole bunch of these magazines without them being very expensive, and ideally, in order to help the gun sell better, those magazines need to remain inexpensive so that buyers can go out and get some spare magazines themselves. And the larger the capacity, the better. And there are a number of submachine gun, well, there are a lot of different submachine gun magazines out there that theoretically would fit this bill, but none of them were in particularly large numbers in the US. One of the exceptions being Suomi's. A lot of Suomi parts kits and drum magazines had been imported to the US, but there wasn't really anything that anyone was doing with them. At this point, the semi-auto Suomi's were not being manufactured yet. And they're just, because these drums don't have feed towers on them, it's kind of difficult to adapt them to any sort of existing firearm. And so they were out there, kind of like the Papasha drums still are today, and there's just not much demand because there's just not much you can do with them. So Masterpiece Arms figured, we will take those drums, that's perfect, super high capacity, easily available, no one's using them, they're cheap, and we'll build a new gun around that. And in order to keep the whole gun cheap, we're going to take as much other existing stuff as we can. In particular, the whole back end or trigger assembly and buttstock off the FN FAL. Again, a lot of FALs have been imported as parts kits. A lot of those were, yes, actually built into complete guns, but there was a lot more parts kits than there were complete FAL semi-auto builds. And so these components were also readily available, and they allowed Masterpiece Arms to not have to manufacture trigger mechanisms, because they just take the FAL trigger mechanism as it is and use it. Although that will have a repercussion elsewhere in the design, as we'll see in a moment. So they design in 2003 a simple blowback 9mm semi-automatic carbine to use these existing parts along with a readily manufacturable new receiver, and they create the MPA-971. So let's take a closer look. We'll pull it apart and I'll show you how it works. All right, a few things to start. First off, we have a full-length, just over 16-inch barrel, so that this is a non-NFA firearm. There is no pistol version of that. Some of you folks born more recently than others may have gotten used to 9mm PCCs being available in short-barreled pistol configuration with arm braces. Well, the arm brace was not a thing back in 2003. If you wanted a non-NFA gun, it had to have a full-length 16-inch barrel. So this will take any standard FAL pistol grip and buttstock. In this case, the current owner, who generously loaned this piece to me to film, has put on American-made DSA parts. So that's why it has what appeared to be an M249 saw, stock, and grip, because DSA made those for the FAL, which was pretty cool at the time, I'm not gonna lie. This is a quite heavy gun. This thing comes in at 10.5 pounds. That's basically 4.8 kilos. Without a magazine, you put a loaded magazine in it and it's like 14 pounds. It's really quite heavy. So I put a red dot on it here myself. We're gonna take it out to the range at the end of this video. So I figured it's a big chunky gun. I'll put a big chunky red dot on it. This is a Gideon Mediator XL, and they're not kidding about the XL, a really gigantic window red dot. This gigantic rat tail lever here is actually the magazine release. Pull that backwards, you can drop the magazine out. This will also take the quad stack Suomi box magazines, but when these guns came out, the drums were much more common than the quad stacks. This piece here is the new manufactured receiver, so that has all the markings on it. Masterpiece Arms, 9mm, made in Carrollton, Georgia. And back behind the bolt, the serial number. Unfortunately, I don't have any reference as to exactly how many of these were made, but this one's only number 397, and they may not have started at 1, so it's not a huge number of these. In large part, I think, because the, well, aside from all of its other issues, mostly being really heavy, the assault weapons ban ended not long after this was made, and it became legal to manufacture new high-capacity magazines again, which kind of obviated the need for a hybrid piece like this. Anyway, we have standard FAL controls over here, so that's safe, that's fire. This set screw prevents the selector from being pushed any farther forward. This would have been the full auto position on the original FAL. The fire control groups also, by the way, do not have the necessary components for full auto, so this is just sort of an extra safety sort of political thing to not allow the selector to go all the way over. And before we take this apart, I want to point out this feature. You may notice the receiver is here. This is the buttstock with what would originally have mounted the FAL rear sight, and it is not exactly in the center of the receiver. And the reason for that is they decided, Masterpiece Arms wanted to use the FAL fire control group unmodified, meaning they wanted to use the hammer in particular unmodified. And that meant they had to actually offset this slightly, and you'll see why in a moment. But what it means is that the rear sight would never actually be in the center, and as a result, they never bothered to put front sights on these guns. In theory, you could offset the front sight just a little bit as well, but I think they recognized that a lot of people wouldn't really have understood why that was done. It would be visually jarring, and instead, they just put a chunk of Picatinny rail on the top so that you could mount whatever sort of optic you wanted instead. We actually begin disassembly using the original FAL disassembly lever, so I'm going to pull this back. That allows me to pivot the buttstock assembly down just slightly. In order to get it the rest of the way out, I have to remove this pin. In sort of Mac pistol style, this is a two-part pin where this side is a small insert with a little spring detent in it. This is the sort of pin that Masterpiece Arms was using in their Mac clones. You pull that out, and then you can push out the main body of the pin, like so. So when in use, these two snap together and lock in place. Anyway, now I can remove the fire control assembly. So all totally standard, like this literally comes off of a FAL parts kit and drops onto the 971 as is. Next up, to take off the barrel assembly, we have a second one of those pins. Pull out the other side. And then I can just slide the receiver off of the barrel assembly. And then I can pull the bolt assembly out through the back of the barrel extension up there. So this is very similar to a Mac M11 sort of bolt. It is telescoped over the front. You can see the barrel actually comes back this far. The bolt, when it's fully forward, telescopes over the first couple inches of the barrel. This was done in the Mac pistol so that you could keep the receiver of the pistol very short. Got a recoil spring here, this guide rod which doubles as the ejector. So you can see that ejector coming out down here by the breech face. That's what kicks the empty cartridge off as the bolt starts going backward. This one has been set up with some really atrocious heavy grease. And I'm not going to clean all of it off there. In particular, I want you to take note of the firing pin back here, and you can see that there's an area of wear off to the side of the firing pin. That is where the hammer is hitting it. So we have our FAL hammer here, which is going to hit the firing pin on the left side. The rest of the hammer is going to impact on the back of the bolt. And the problem here is that this guide rail, which acts as the ejector, has to be at the edge of the bolt face so that it's properly aligned to actually eject cartridges. So you can't move this rod over any, but the FAL hammer here is too wide to be properly centered and hit the firing pin without interfering with that rod. So the hammer, in turn, the entire fire control assembly has to be offset just a bit to one side, which means we have this cutout for the hammer, which is also offset to one side, and that is why the FAL rear sight can't be used on this thing. So here's the receiver. This is really the heart of the gun, holds everything else in relation with all of the relevant parts. It does include the magazine well, which is a legal requirement for this to be considered the receiver. There's a big block at the back, so the bolt is going to come up to just this point. That means that the barrel extension can be really simple, just plain bent sheet metal. Doesn't have to have any sort of back end to it because you've got that rear block on the receiver instead. We then have a side charging handle. You can't have a top charging handle like most of the Macs because you've got this Picatinny rail in the way. And the element here that this charging handle runs in is screwed onto that sheet metal barrel extension. You've got two screws there. You've got one screw there. That one is accessible through the ejection port. Then our last bit of disassembly is to take off the handguards. These are M4 handguards, but they are not held in place using an M4 system. Instead, we have a threaded front cap that just slides right off, and then the handguards just slide right off. You can have whatever handguards you like on this. The owner of this particular gun has added a vertical front grip to it as well. We have a rear handguard retainer as well. Very simple pieces. These are elements made by Masterpiece Arms. And then the barrel is actually a reasonably heavy profile barrel. It's small in diameter down here because the bolt has to telescope over it, like so. But pretty chunky up here, which is actually a good thing if you're actually going to use large capacity drum magazines. You have the potential to get this barrel pretty darn hot. So not a bad idea to have a thick barrel. The ribbing out here I think is just stylistic, and we have a little bit of threading to attach the front handguard retainer. All right, and there is the MPA-971, all fully disassembled. As far as reputation goes, these guns are known for being heavy and kind of awkward, but also pretty reliable. The Suomi magazines are very good, very reliable, and the guns are well enough put together that they tend to run pretty darn well. Masterpiece Arms, for all of the potential issues with some of its guns, did have plenty of experience making this style of Ingram type bolt. There's like really nothing innovative or brand new or experimental in this design. It's just a repackaging of existing elements that are all pretty well known good designs. So let me go ahead and put this back together and let's take it out to the range and give it a try. All right, let's see how this thing actually shoots. I mean, it's only kind of rattly in every position. Man, that kicks a lot of gas back. That's actually quite unpleasant left-handed. So enough of that nonsense. We're going to do this right-handed. Man, even right-handed I can feel this big puff of gas coming out every time I pull the trigger. That is heavy, front heavy, kind of awkward, and really not as good as any modern AR-based PCC. It does have the drum thing, which is cool, but there's a reason that these didn't stay in production all that long. They are expensive now because they are a rare thing, but trust me when I say you are buying the rarity and the vibes, you are not getting a high quality, enjoyable gun to shoot. I do want to thank the viewer who loaned me his MPA-971 to film. I really appreciate that because I had no particular interest in going out and buying one for myself. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. All right, I cleared the star through volume of fire alone.